At the height of the Dutch Empire, the Dutch East India Company, one company, accounted for a full third of the entire world's global trade. It's crazy when you look at Holland on a map. And you're like, how on earth did this little country and one company inside of that little country account for a full third of the world's global trade? And then when I talk about reinvesting the new wealth into education, the Dutch crushed that. And at their peak, 8% of the world's universities were based in the Netherlands. 12% of books published globally were published in the Netherlands. Again, tiny little country. You'd never suspect. I would have never suspected. Now, another innovation that really boosted the success of the Dutch East India Company was a special deal that they struck with the Dutch government. So they approached the Dutch government and were able to, they were granted their own private military that would chaperone them on their trade expeditions. So obviously this helped, right? You show up at the negotiating table and it's just me, I'm gonna get a certain deal. But I show up at the negotiating table and it's me plus 12 guys with AK-47s, I'm probably gonna get a better deal, right? So having the military escort really helped. But this marriage of military and industry sanctioned by the government is the first modern example that we have of the military-industrial complex. It worked very well, so well that obviously the British replicated this with the British East India Company, and it's very alive today in both America and in China. Okay, so getting back to our cycle, right? Productivity builds wealth. Wealth is reinvested in education. Education breeds better innovation. Better innovation builds a more competitive economy. A more competitive economy gives us access to global trade. Now we can do business everywhere, and that brings in more wealth. So now we're highly profitable. We're no longer the poverty-stricken country we used to be, and this brings new demands, namely for security, right? We have wealth now. That needs to be protected. We have trade routes now. Those need to be defended. And so this is the stage of empire where you see every single time aggressive investment into the military. And what happens as a consequence of that? You have a profitable entity because of their percentage of global trade, and now they're safe because they just built a massive military. Now, a profitable and safe entity is a fantastic investment opportunity. And so now they start attracting capital from the rest of the world, right? For the first time ever, everyone's taken notice. And this all sounds really good. What's not to like, right? The economy's growing, they're gaining respect and trust, money's coming flooding back in. But here is where the devil's in the details. For the first time ever, our emerging nation has access to something they've never had access to before. Debt, right? And debt is incredibly seductive, the creep of debt, because it allows you to grow faster than your organic productivity would normally. And very few people are able to reject that possibility.
Real quick break here, guys. If you are a mining investor, you are without question familiar with the Golden Triangle region in British Columbia. This is one of the most prolific mining regions in the world due to its vast deposits of gold, silver, and copper. Now, for the last 4 years, Dolly Varden Silver has been busy expanding their high-grade silver deposit in the Triangle, and they are backed by some of the smartest investors in the silver business, including the legendary Eric Sprott, Hecla Mining, US Global Investors, Fidelity, Delbrook Capital, Sprott Resource Corp, and more. If you are curious why the smartest money in the silver business is cozying up to Dolly Varden Silver, then hit the link beneath this video.
So as the living standards increase, right, people start demanding more stuff because the country's wealthier and everybody feels like they deserve more. The generations that used to work super hard in the old days and remember where they came from, they're long gone. The generation that's alive today in this empire, they've known nothing but wealth, right? Back then, they were poor and they knew they were poor. And today, they're rich and they know they're rich. And so they want nicer stuff. I mean, we don't want a nice car, do we? We want a nicer car than the one that we have. And that's gonna cost more money. So we wanna earn more money as we're rising up, right, in terms of global status. So the people start asking for higher wages. It's logical, right? They're rich now. They deserve more money. But everybody wants more money, including the owners of corporations and the shareholders. And they start looking at the wage creep in their country. They used to have cheap labor. The labor's not cheap anymore because the country's not poor anymore. They start looking at their margins, and every single time what we see is the executives essentially say, I wonder if we can get our products made somewhere cheaper. And our crafty Dutch friends looked across the North Sea to that funny little island and said, here's an idea. Why don't we have our ships designed here in the Netherlands, but let's have them built over there using cheap British labor. And just like that, they export the productive engine that made them rich in the first place. Now, this is great for business because margins go back up and shareholders are making more money, but a bunch of people just lost jobs. And therefore, the leverage to ask for higher earnings because there's less jobs for every person, right? People aren't happy. They get a little bit upset about this, right? And the government wants to keep the peace, so this is when they step in with all kinds of assistance. And back in Rome, this was the grain dole. Today, it's any number of welfare systems that we have, but it's the same story. It's the same thing. The government wants to keep the peace. Business is good, so they step in to take care of their people. And the problem with this eventually becomes that the nation's not as productive as it used to be. They exported that productive engine to somebody else. Somebody else has it now. So they're spending more on increased military demands, increased living standards at home, and they took all that debt, and interest payments have to be made. And suddenly, our rising empire is feeling a little bit squeezed. But don't worry, they control the world reserve currency, and they can just print more, and they do. And no nation in history that's controlled the world reserve currency has resisted that temptation. So we're now expanding the money supply, increasing the wealth gap, and we're back to our sunset years of the empire. But that funny little island across the North Sea, productivity is fueling wealth. That productive engine that existed in the Netherlands, they've got it now. And they're reinvesting that wealth in education. They're building ships for the Dutch, the best ships in the world, so they got really good at building ships. And this was the seeds for what would eventually become the greatest navy that the world had ever seen, and the cycle begins back where it started, again and again and again. So what can we take away from this? It's the same movie that plays over and over again. And at the bookends of it, there's two things. On one side, it's productivity builds wealth. And on the other side, it's debt fuels decline. Now, this matters to me because I can make this super personal. I want to emancipate myself from the cycles of empire. I want the J. Martin empire to be on the way up.